This week's parasha, Parashat Vaetchanan, is jam-packed with really deep ideas. From the very first word, Vaetchanan, Moshe Rabbeinu's 515 tefillot to Hashem, he's pleading, Hashem, please, 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 let me enter Eretz Yisrael, give me a nahala. We've discussed so many times in the past the back and forth between Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem ultimately saying, Rav Lach, enough, you can't enter Eretz Yisrael. The Megillah Mukot that we quote all year long has a whole sefer, the Ofanim, just on this discussion. Also in this week's parasha, we have the retelling of the Aseret HaDibrot, 10 Commandments being said over with those slight nuances we've discussed in the past. We have the parasha of Shema Yisrael, the Shema, in the first paragraph of Shema in this week's parasha. There's big stuff in this week's parasha. But I want to jump to a different part of the parasha. I want to go to the last aliyah, a little bit of a less flashy part of the parasha. This is Perek Zayin, Pasuk Zayin. But wow, there's a really big remez here. There's a massive hint over here that I think, B'ezrat Hashem, at least for me, it gives me a little bit of chizuk. Okay, it says as follows. Moshe is now in the middle of warning the Jewish people of how to act properly when they enter into Eretz Yisrael. A bunch of warnings. This is part of the bigger Tohacha, Musar, the words of advice that Moshe Rabbeinu was giving us before we enter Eretz Yisrael. And he tells us, don't marry the locals. He tells us, remove the Avodah Zarah from the land. You know, the Avodah Zarah, the idolatry is going to bother us throughout the Nevi'im. We're not going to really make it in this angle completely. And then he notes, he wants us to know that we're a special people, we're a chosen people. But then he explains, Lo merubchem mikol ha'amim chashak Adonai bachem. It's not because we're merubeh. It's not because we're so numerous in number. The Jewish people were always small in number. We're always going to be tiny. You know, if we look at our percentage, less than 1% of the world, they make the joke that if we try to round us up, we equal 0. We're always going to be small. And Hashem doesn't love us because we're great in numbers. It's not the number, the koach in strength that makes us so special. That's not why chashak Hashem bachem, that Hashem desired us, vayivchar bachem, and Hashem chose us. Rather, ki atem HaMe'at mikol ha'amim. Rather, because we're the me'at mikol ha'amim. In the English translation that I found, it translated ki atem, because indeed we are the few amongst the people. We're the smallest of the nations. Meaning, the way the English translation works is that it's we are small in number, because indeed we're very, very small. It kind of repeats what the beginning of the pasuk is saying. But that's a little bit redundant. And if we already said that we're not merubim, then we're also me'at. So rather, let's learn like Rashi. Rashi learns the word ki, not like the English, but he learns ki atem me'at. You want to know why Hashem chose us? Because we're small. Meaning, says Rashi, ki atem me'at, hare ki meshamesh b'lishon deha. You should know that the word ki meshamesh b'lishon deha, it means because. Hashem didn't pick us because we're great in number. That's not why we're chosen. Rather, why? Because we are me'at. Because we are small, that is dafka why Hashem picks us. I know there's many people that go in the direction of that we're small in number. Hashem likes the small. Hashem likes the weaker. Hashem is not looking for the strength. That's not what it's all about. But let's look at Rashi. How does Rashi understand by us? What does it mean that Hashem desires us because we are me'at? So he says, Ki atem me'at, ha'mema'atin atzmechem. We make ourselves smaller. We humble ourselves. We have hachna'ah. And Rashi, paraphrasing the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Pei Tet Amud Aleph, he writes, Kagon Avraham, she'amar va'anochi afar va'efer, like Avraham Avinu, who said of himself, I am but the dust of the earth. I'm the dust on the earth. I'm down below. Okay, Kagon Moshe va'aron, she'amru v'nachnu ma. And like Moshe and Aaron, they said, va'nachnu ma, what are we? And the Gemara over there actually adds, David HaMelech over there says, va'anochi tolat v'lo ish. I am but a worm, but not a man. Rashi Bayas continues, Lo Nebuchadnezzar. It's not like the evil Nebuchadnezzar, she'amar edameh la'elyon. I'm going to be I'm comparable, I'm as great as the Elyon, as God. The Sanherib, who said, Shamar, mi bechol Elohei aratzot, the Sanherib was gloating. He says, who out there from all the gods of the lands over there can compare to me? The Hiram Shamar, El Ani, he says, Hiram says, I am a God, Moshav Elohim Yashavti, I sat on the seat of God. So not like those haughty rulers. We the Jewish people, Hashem loves us, Hashem picks us, Hashem desires us. He's chafetz banu. Why? Because we're me'atim ourselves. We make ourselves smaller. We humble. We understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who's truly in charge. We lower ourselves. Why? Because we recognize the bigger picture. I saw in Hasidic Sefer, I saw in Sefer Bat Ayin, Parashat Vayishlach. So he also explains the idea of me'at in this idea of greatness, slightly nuanced. He says, Perush, Shatem yodim u'mevinim shekol inyonei olam hazeh hu ha'me'at. Perush tafel legabei mala. We understand that all of olam hazeh, all this physical world down below that we live in, it's all the me'at. It's all tafel. It's all secondary to mala, to what's above, to spirituality. We get it. We get it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everything. everything, and we get it that this physical world down below, that's not what it's all about. There's something much, much greater. Similarly, says the Bat Ayin in Parshat Pinchas, beautiful remez. Ubederech remez milat emet. The fact that we're trying to follow the truth, we're trying to live our life based on emet, based on truth, the way our forefathers, our tradition that we know, what is the real truth? Emet rashi tevot shel efer ma tolat. The word emet stands for efer. That's when Avram said that he's like the dust. It's the word ma. Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron saying what nachnu ma. The tolat. David HaMelech saying I'm but a worm, not a man. Meaning they understood what's the path of truth that they taught us. That we have to recognize, humble ourselves, recognize we're not everything. Hakadosh Baruch Hu is really everything. We are tafel. This world down below is tafel to something much, much greater. To the Elyonim, to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. There's a much bigger thing to be doing in life. Okay, that's the real emet. Now, interesting, when Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to dissuade Korach and his followers, stop the rebellion. So if we look at the language over there, we also have a language of HaMe'at. Moshe Rabbeinu rebukes them. He says, HaMe'at mikem ki ivdil Elohei Yisrael etchem adat Yisrael lakriv etchem elav. Well, he says, is it not enough for you that the God of Israel set you guys apart from everybody to get close to God, to serve God in the Beit HaMikdash and the Mishkan, to do the avodah of the Kohanim, of the Leviim? What, Korach, what are you and your people making a rebellion from? HaMe'at. Is it not enough for you? Meaning, where you're lacking anava over here. You're lacking humility. Humble yourself. Recognize how great you already are. Stop this silly rebellion. So HaMe'at, the koach of HaMe'at is for us to recognize who we really are and what we're really all about, that really we are nothing compared to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're tafel, we're secondary. But in that recognition, that's why Hashem loves us. That's why Hashem says we get it and we're a chosen nation because of it. Okay, so that's the pshat of Rashi on our pasuk and our parasha on the word HaMe'at. But B'ezrat Hashem, let's try to get a little bit deeper. Let's try to look at some deeper hints, some ramazim on what is this word HaMe'at is. And actually, we're going to return in a couple of minutes to Rashi himself in an earlier Rashi. But first, let's go to the Baal HaTurim. Says the Baal HaTurim, Ki atem HaMe'at, Hey Me'at. Read the word Ki atem HaMe'at as Hey Me'at, 5 less. We are 5 less. What does that mean? So he says, Nun Zayin Mishpachot Parashat Pinchas. If we open up Parashat Pinchas, that parasha was talking about the inheritance of the land of Israel, how the Nachala would be broken up by the different families. And if you count the families over there, Rashi does it, and we'll get to this Rashi in a second, Rashi does it there as well, you get to 57 families. The Het Balevi'im, you add the other 8 families of Levi'im that didn't get Nachala, Hare Samechei, that gives us 65. Now, actually, this concept of adding Hey Levi'im to the 57 families, that itself becomes a little bit of a question. There's a Bombatik Akasha by the Nachalat Yaakov, where he says, I don't understand why that's true, because in our parsha, there's only 4 families of Levi'im. Chet is a different parsha. Why are you mixing up parshas? Really big kasha. I saw in the Sefer Be'er Basadeh, which we're going to get to. He apparently says that the best answer that he found was in a Sefer called Minchat Yehuda, in a book called Asifat Zakenim, and he says, Devarav hem ha'emet. And his words, they're the correct words. He has the best answer to this kasha, but sadly, I looked, couldn't find this sefer. So if anybody finds the sefer, could take a picture, send it over to me. I would love to see how he answers the kasha. But let's get back to our Baal HaTurim. It's in the Rashi there as well. So he says as follows. He says, Nun Zayin Mishpachot, there are 57 families, plus the 8 families of the Levi'im. That makes 65. 65 is Hey Me'at. 65 is 5 less than the number we need. Why? Because he says, because when you add then the 5 daughters of Tzlofchad, then we're going to get to the 70, because we want to get to 70 families. We know that magic number is always 70. We had the 70 souls who went down to Egypt. We have ourselves the 70 nations of the world. We want to have 70 families amongst the Jewish people. So in that parsha, we had gotten to 65. And but how did we get to the 70? Because right afterwards, the Benot Tzlofchad, they plead, we want Nachala in Eretz Yisrael as well. So if there was 5 Benot Tzlofchad, the 5 banot plus the 65 families, we get to our 70. So too, the Rokeach by us is the exact same idea. 65 families plus the 5 banot Tzlofchad, we get ourselves to 70. And that's the Hey Me'at, we're lacking of the 5. Okay. But if it's true that the Benot Tzlofchad, they get us back up to 70, so then why is the hint on our parasha HaMe'at, that were only 65. Why are they kind of like, being left out of the number count? Or what's the real hint going on over here? So actually, if you look at Rabbeinu Bahaye on our parasha, so he keeps it at 65. He says, V'darshu razal ki atem HaMe'at, and the rabbis taught us atem HaMe'at, HaMe'at, Hey mishpachot Yisrael chasarim mishpachot b'nei Noach shayu shivim. He says the Jewish people were 5 families less than the b'nei Noach, than the 70 nations of the world. We were 5 less. B'Yisrael hayu samechei mishpachot kamo shenimneu miparashat Pinchas, and we were 65, just like we saw in Parashat Pinchas. So he keeps it at 65. So too Rashi over there in Parashat Pinchas. We're going back now to Perek Kafaf Pasuk Lamed Vav. He also does the family count, and he doesn't even hint to Benot Tzlofchad, even though the story happens after. There's no hint to it. Says Rashi, Tze v'chashov, if you go and you count the number of people in the Parashat in Pinchas, v'timsa beparasha zo 57 mishpachot u'mibnei Levi 8 harei 65. We're getting ourselves to 60 to get to 65. V'zeu shneimar ki atem HaMe'at, and over there he says, and that's the hint in our parasha of atem HaMe'at HaMe'at, 5 atem chaserim mishpachot kol amim. You're lacking 5 when compared to the rest of the nations. Shehen shiv'im, because they are 70. Av zo hevanti miyosodo. Moshe Darshan, he learned this from his Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Darshan. Okay, beautiful. Now, I actually saw one source on the Balatorim. He says, wait a second, why would the Balatorim count in the Benot Tzlofchad? We don't really count the women in the count, because we know the Nachala won't last with them. Eventually, they're going to marry out, and their husbands will take over the Nachala. So really, and it is only 65. And I actually think that it is kind of is the idea that we were speaking about the last couple of weeks at the end of Bamidbar, that there's a hint to a future Nachala, to an Atid Lavo Nachala that seems to be represented in the female Nachala, but it's not supposed to last. So really it makes sense that right now we have the remez of 65, because that's the real number. The real number is 65. There's just other 5 that is this Koach Nashi, because I saw in that source, he says there's a certain power, a certain remez, the Koach Nashi, a female energy, and it's needed. It's needed as part of Am Yisrael, and it's important to recognize and mention that Koach Nashi. And I was actually thinking, if we go back to the 70 Jewish people who went down to Egypt, there's women there as well. We have Dina and Serach Bat Asher. They're included in the actual list of the 70. And even though we don't get to the full 70, everyone's wondering, where is that number 70? So we also have one of the approaches in Chazal, is that Yocheved is that 70. So we have ourselves 2 to 3 women that are part of the 70 people that come down. So this number of 70, the 70 people, the 70 families that we're trying to get to, it has to have the Koach HaNashi. There has to be something deeper over here of this female energy inside that number count. But now let's stick with our 65, because that's the actual number. The actual number of Mishpachot is 65. That's the hint in our parasha, the HaMe'at. We're lacking 5. We don't compare it to the non-Jewish world, because we're lacking 5 Mishpachot as compared to the 70 nations. Okay. Says the Maskil David on the Rashi, back on that Parsha in Pinchas, is a cool idea. What does this number 5 come to symbolize? Ubetama davar le'eze tachlit ba'u bekivun shechot Yisrael hey pachot me'ayin umot. Why is it important that our families reached close to 70, but we were minus 5? What is that 5 all about, comparing us to the non-Jewish nations? Nira li lomar sheba lirmos Yisrael ein alehem shum shlita mikol ha'ayin ha'umot rak mehei umot levad. He says that you should know all the other nations of the world, they have nothing on us. They cannot defeat us. They can't hurt us. They have no shlita. They have no real power over us, except for 5. There are 5 nations that are really going to make a balagan. Dehainu, when he explains, Mitzrayim, we have ourselves Egypt. That was Shaya Galut HaRishon. That was the first exile. V'achar kach Hadalid Galiyot, and then the 4 Galiyot of Bavel, Madai, Yavan, and Edom. And we're now currently in the Galut of Edom, according to the Pshat. And therefore, we have ourselves 5 Galuyot, and therefore 5 nations who can take power, have a bit of shlita, that when we go into Galut, we're going to be under their sadly, their shlita, under their rule. Okay. Now, he's going to have a side question over here. We've spoken in the past as well. Is it 4 Galuyot or is it 5? What about Galut Yishmael? Where does Yishmael fit into the whole story? So he actually answers beautifully in both angles we spoke about in the past. Ve'af agav de'ika nami Yishmael. What about Yishmael? They also have shlita over us at times. They make us a big balagan throughout history. Hem bichlal Galut Edom. So approach number 1, he says, she'akol bizman echad. He says that Edom and Ishmael, it's that fourth exile which becomes the five. That's the prophecies of the horn with the horn on top. We have ourselves this mixture of Edom and Ishmael coming together. V'bait ema dal Mitzrayim hacha. Or he says cancel the first exile of Mitzrayim because that already took place. That Mitzrayim is known in certain sense as the shorsh of all the other ones. So it's like its own little category, but also chronologically it already happened before our pasuk. We already left Egypt already at this point. Velo ramza Torah elea demai dehave have. Apik Mitzrayim va'ayil Ishmael, and the Torah is not going to mention it now in its hint because we don't care about Mitzrayim anymore. Mitzrayim is done with. If anything, Mitzrayim would fall under Ishmael today, but Mitzrayim is over. So get rid of Mitzrayim va'ayil Ishmael and put Ishmael in instead, and therefore we have ourselves 5 nations that actually can have rulership over the Jewish people. Okay. So that's the base of what is Me'at. Now, let's try to close with one more approach. This is now the mystical approach of what does it mean of HaMe'at. So I saw this in the Shlach Kadosh. He brings it down in a couple of places, but let's look at his Perush in the Haggadah, because I think there it's the clearest. Says the Shlach Kadosh, he has a beautiful idea that within the holy name of Hashem, within the Yud Kei Vav Kei, there's a deeper hint to the whole Torah, to Hashem, and to the Jewish people. We always speak about this great unity of Kuchabricha, Oraita, Yisrael, Chadu, that the Torah, that Hashem, the Jewish people, were all one big unified group. We're all together. So explains the Shlach Kadosh. He says in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, in God's name, we have the Yud. The Yud corresponds to the 10 Commandments. And I want to add, 10 Commandments is not just 10 Commandments. It's Ma'amad Har Sinai. It's the start of all of Hashem's revelation to us. In a certain sense, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We mentioned last week the idea of the rope, Hashem, the Noten, the Jewish people, the Mekabel at the end, the Torah being there in the middle. So the 10 Commandments is kind of when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming down to earth. This is the side of Hashem. This is the Yud. So but he says the Yud, Aserta Dibrot. Then we have ourselves the Hey. What's the Hey? The first Hey in Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Hey corresponds to the Torah Shebichtav, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Then we have the Vav and the Vav Kei. The Vav is the Vav Sidrei Mishnah. It's the 6 studying in the Mishnah. So we have ourselves Hashem, the written Torah, and the oral Torah. So that becomes now the Yud, the K, and the Vav. And now what is the last K? What does the last Hey in Hashem's name correspond to? So the last Hey, the final Hey, that corresponds as the Shlach Kadosh to us, to Yisrael. Yisrael, we are the Jewish people who are linked to the Torah. We are the spiritual 600,000 neshamot that connect to the 600,000 letters of the Torah. Yisrael, Yeshishim Ribot Yot La Torah. We connect directly to the Torah. We are in a certain aspect part of those letters of the Torah. Maybe the neshamot to those letters in the Torah, as I heard once from Rav Zev Lev. So he says that's the meaning of the pasuk. Says the Shlach Kadosh. This is what it means in Tehillim when we say Torat Hashem, the Torah of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Torat Hashem Temima. It's perfect. Meshivat Nafesh. What does Meshivat Nafesh mean? So in the English translation it says, because it's Meshiv Nefesh, it renews our life. It brings back Koach to our soul. It's Meshivat Nafesh. But says the Shlach Kadosh, no. That's not what Meshivat Nafesh means. Meshivat Nafesh is, it returns. It's Meshiv, like the Teshuvah, Shuva, to return. It returns our souls. Meaning, the Torah is only Temimah. It's only perfect when we, Yisrael, are Meshivat Nafesh. When we connect to the Torah. When we return to the Torah, that's when the Torah is perfect. So therefore, we have Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei, Yud, 10 Commandments, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Revelation, Hey, 5 books of the Torah, Vav, 6 Sidrei Mishnah, and the final Hey is us when we're Meshivat Nafesh, when we connect our souls back to the Torah. But now the question is, how do we connect back? So we spoke many times in the past that the Hey also corresponds to Olam Hazeh. It's the creation of this world with the opening on top of the Hey, on the top left corner. That's going to correspond to Teshuvah, the concept of Lashuv. We're going to come back to that whole to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, says the Shlach Kadosh, we, the Jewish people, we connect to that letter Hey. But he says our connection point to get back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, actually our connection to get to the name of Hashem, we don't pronounce the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. What name do we pronounce? We pronounce the name of Adnut. Adnut is the name of the Aleph, Daled, the Nun, and the Yud. We don't pronounce Yud Kei Vav Kei as it is. We pronounce Adnut. And therefore, our connection point, our shower, our gateway to get to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is the whole opening chapter in Sefer Shaarei Orav, Rabbi Yosef Kishkatilia, through the name Adnut, the Aleph, the Daled, the Nun, and the Yud, that's our ticket back to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now, interestingly, in Svardik Sidurim, when you have the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, a lot of times in the Sidur, in the second Hey, in the Yud Kei Vav Kei, that Hey will actually have the name Aleph Daled Nun Yud. The Adnut will actually be written in smaller in the whole, the bottom part of the whole of the letter Hey over there, because there seems to be this connection, or our ticket to get to a Kadosh Baruch Hu is through the name Aleph Daled Nun and the Yud. Okay, so now let's get back to our pasuk. Let's get to the Shlach Kadosh. V'kvar katavti lemala nishmot Yisrael besod Adonai mimekor Yisrael. There's a pasuk in Tehillim, the pasuk there says, "B'mikalot barachu Elohim." In assemblies, when we all get together, we bless Hakadosh Baruch Hu. B'makelot, we bless God. Adonai mimekor Yisrael. And then the pasuk says Adonai, but now it's saying it Aleph Daled, the Nun and the Yud, not the Yud Kei Vav Kei, but the other name of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Here it's using God's name, but an Aleph Daled Nun Yud. So it says that the Adnut is mimekor Yisrael. So here the translation says it's from the fountain of Yisrael. I don't know what that means, but let's learn now the way Shlach Kadosh is learning. Mimekor, the name of the Aleph Daled Nun Yud, that is the makor, that is the root for Yisrael. That is our way to get to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'zehu remez ki atem HaMe'at mikol ha'amim. And says the Shla, and this is the hint in our pasuk by us, ki atem, you guys are the HaMe'at mikol ha'amim. V'katav Rashi, hey me'at. And Rashi said we are hey less. Why are we hey less? Ki nichnesu besod heizo. Because our ticket to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through this hey. We have the Yud, the Kei, the Vav, and the Kei, the hey me'at. The hey, that second hey, that's our ticket back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then he says, V'hayu samechei, kiminyan adon Aleph Daled Nun Yud haoleh samechei. And he says, you want to know what else? We were 65 families hinted to in the Hey Me'at, that last Hey of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. We were 65 families because 65 families is Gematria, Aleph Daled Nun and Yud. Says the Shlach Kadosh, Zo Torat Hashem Meshivat Nafesh. This is what we mean when we say Torat Hashem. We said it's perfect, it's Tima. Why Meshivat Nafesh? When the souls come back to it. What's Omar? Otiyot Yud Kei Vav. It means that the first three letters of God's name, Morot ala Torah Shebechtav v'Shebe'al Peh, refers to the written Torah and the oral Torah. Kedei Pirashti, as he explained, the Yud, Aseret Dibrot, the Hey, the 5 books of the Chumash, the Vav, the 6 Sidrei Mishnah. V'hi temima, and it's perfect. What's Omar? Hashem shalem b'kfilut hey sham nefashot Yisrael. The name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is perfect, and we're having, by returning that last hey, by having both of those hays, only when we have the nefashot Yisrael, the Jewish people. Kedei Pirash, as I explained, hey achrona sod v'shemenu karati b'shmecha. He says, and the hey achrona is the secret, as he said somewhere else, of ushemenu karata b'shmecha. Ushemenu karata b'shmecha is part of the tefillah that we say on the Yamim Noraim. Normally we translate it as ushmenu karata b'shmecha, and our name ushmenu Karata bishmecha, you have called by your name. Our name, Ushmenu, you have called based on your name, which a lot of the commentators on the Siddur explain. Our name is Yisrael. The name Yisrael has the name Kel in it. So to speak, Hashem's name is in ours as well. We have part of God's name in our name itself. Ushmenu Karata bishmecha. You named us based on your name. But the Shlach Kadosh learns the exact opposite. He learns the word be, the bet, as in Ushmenu, and our name Karata bishmecha. You took our name and you called your name Karata bishmecha. Inside your name, in the Yud Kei Vav Kei, in that last letter Hey, that's where you put our name. Meaning we correspond to the Hey in the Yud Kei Vav Kei. We correspond to the 65 families, Gematria, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, the name Anud that we use to say HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. Meaning we are the ticket to completing Hashem's name, and through our tefillot with the Aleph Daled Nun Yud, we're able to return that Hey to the Yud Kei Vav Kei, make the full Tmimah, the full completion, the full Yichud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. Now this idea is hinted to in a pasuk in Tehillim. Says the pasuk in Tehillim, Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei behechal kodsho. Hashem is in His holy palace. Hashem bashamayim kiso. Hashem is is up in His holy throne in the heavens. Einav yechazu afapav yibchanu bnei adam. And from up above He beholds, He gazes down at, He searches for mankind. Okay, another. So it's, but the pasuk there says Vashem behechal kodsho. Another pasuk in Habakkuk similar says Vashem behechal kodsho. Hashem is in His holy His holy palace, His holy abode, Hasmi panav kol haaretz, and the whole world is silent before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says Rav Yosef Chikatilia in his Sharei Orah, says the Megalei Amukot, says the Gaon Mivilna, as well as many other Hasidic Sfarim that I saw bring it down afterwards. Let's actually look at the Graz version. V'nimtza havaya behester v'adnut begilui. The Yud Kei Vav Kei is hidden. We don't pronounce it. We don't say it. But the Aleph Daled Nun Yud, that is begilui. That is open. That everybody can see. And that's the concept of Hashem behechal kodsho. Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hashem is in His Heichal, He's in His palace. What is Heichal? Heichal Keminyan Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Heichal is Gematria 65, Gematria Adnut. Actually, I saw also brought down Shlach Kadosh says also the word Has, that everyone's going to be silent from Hashem. Everyone recognizes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everything. Has, also Gematria 65. But the concept is, what is the Heichal of Hashem? What is the palace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How do we get to Yud Kei Vav Kei? It's through the Shem, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, and Yud. But to get to that Heichal Hashem, I saw the Zohar brings down Heichal is also the Heichal of Teshuvah. We need Lashuv, Meshivat Nafesh, as the Shlach Kadosh says. We have to get back to the Hey idea. We have to get back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through that Hey, through that Teshuvah. But it has to be real Teshuvah. Yirmiyahu, the prophet, the Navi Yirmiyahu warns us. He says, Al tiftechu lachem et divrei hasheker lemor. He says, don't trust in the divrei sheker, in these illusions that you tell yourself. Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem Hema. You say the temple of God, the temple of Hashem are these buildings. You say that you want to get to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You want to know what the Heichal of Hashem is? It's the Beit HaMikdash. It's the physical location. We made the mistake. We were just coming up now, Shabbat Nahamu, we're coming off Tisha B'Av. But part of the mistake was we trusted too much in just doing the ritual. We didn't actually come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly. Yes, we brought the korbanot, but the kavanot weren't in the right place. We thought, okay, we just do the service. That's going to be good enough. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no. The Nevi'im warned us. No. That's not the real Heichal. The real Heichal is not the physical place. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu took his wrath on the stones. It broke the Beit HaMikdash because ultimately he didn't want to destroy us because we have to exist. We have to be around this. That's part of the Nechama, is that we're always going to be here. But we have to understand what's the real Heichal. The real Heichal is our tefillot. It's our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Heichal is Gematria, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, and Yud. It's our tefillot. It's our adanim. It's our prayers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The real adanim of the Beit HaMikdash, the real sockets that hold it all up, is the adnuts, is our 100 blessings every single day to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is our connections that we want to make to Hashem. I saw in a Hasidic Sefer, so he plays on the word Heichal Hashem Hema. What does it mean Heichal Hashem Hema? So he says Hema means they themselves. That meaning we ourselves are supposed to be the Heichal Hashem. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu really is supposed to be within us. We're supposed to have a much deeper connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not this superficial, external. If we build the Beit HaMikdash properly, then Hashem is going to dwell in us, meaning it has to be something much, much deeper. It has to be now a much more complete connection. Yes, we want to Beit HaMikdash. Yes, we want to find our ways to try to get to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, those places to get a bit closer, but ultimately the goal is for me to be closer because HaKadosh Baruch Hu really is going to dwell within me. And I think maybe this is what the Be'er Basadeh on that Rashi was saying on Derech Remez. It says the Be'er Basadeh. So we said that we are HaMe'at. We are the small ones, but we are HaMe'at. We are 5 less. We're only Gematria 65. We're only Samech A. So he says, Benirali, Shezeu She'amar Heichal Hashem Hema. And he says, this is what I think means in this idea that Heichal Hashem Hema, that they are the Heichal Hashem. Dahainu, Minyan Shem Aleph Dal Nun Yun, Shehi HaShochenet Itam. That the Gematria of 65, the Gematria of the Aleph Dal Nun Yun, the Shem Adnut, that's Shochenet Itam. That's Shochen. That's dwelling with us. That's our connection point. V'zehu, and this is the meaning, Asher Nishbati Lahem Bach. And this is the meaning when Moshe Rabbeinu is praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu after the Chet HaEgel. He wants to bring tshuva to the Jewish people. So says the Gemara in Berachot, this is Daf Lamed Bet Amun Aleph, says as follows: Zechor leAvraham Yitzchak Yisrael Badecha Asher Nishbata Lahem Bach. Moshe Rabbeinu says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, remember the promise you made to your servants Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yisrael. When you promised them, you swore to them. Basically, you swore to them you wouldn't destroy us after you weren't going to get rid of us. My Bach. What do you mean you swore to them? Asher Nishbata Lahem Bach. You swore to them in yourself. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Amar Moshe Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ribono shel olam. Moshe says to God. Il malei nishbata lahem b'shamayim va'aretz. If you had sworn to them, nishbati bahem b'shamayim va'aretz, when you get to Ha'azinu, where Hashem is going to bring in as witnesses, shamayim va'aretz, if you would have sworn to them through the shamayim va'aretz, hayiti omer kashem shamayim va'aretz betelim, just like the shamayim and aretz are one day be done with, kach shvuatecha betela. So too your shvuah is going to be nullified. V'achshav shenishbata lahem b'shimcha hagadol. But now that you swore to them, bach, you swore to them in your holy name, meaning you brought your Shem, you swore in your name. Just like your name will always endure forever and ever for all of eternity, so too your oath is going to stand for all of eternity, and therefore Moshe is saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't destroy the Jewish people because you swore on your name, and your name is forever. Now, says the Be'er Basada, he makes one more leap over here. So he says, so too Yisrael is always going to exist. And this is what it says in Yoshua. What can we do with your name? Meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your name is so great, your name can never be destroyed. But now, wait a second. If your name can never be destroyed, so if you put it all together, what are we saying? Hashem's name is forever, and what's part of Hashem's name? Us. We are the Hey. We are the HaMe'at. We are that Hey, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the last Hey. That's Meshivat Nafesh. That's us coming back. That's all of us coming back. All 65 families. Gematria Adnut, Gematria Aleph Dal Nun Hey. All of us, we are part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name because Hashem made us a part of His name. And if that's true, just like Hashem's name will be Kayam Le'ol Me'olamim, so too we will be Kayam Le'ol Me'olamim. We will always exist. Shabbat Shalom.